In the heart of the Mississippi Delta, where the sun burns the earth to a cracked, rusty red and the cicadas hum like a choir of restless spirits, Clara Jackson sat on the sagging porch of her family's old shotgun house in Clarksdale. The house, with its peeling paint and warped boards, stood at the edge of town, where the cotton fields met the asphalt. At 32, Clara was a woman frayed by life's relentless pull. No husband, no children, and a part-time job shelving books at the county library that barely paid for groceries. Her hands, calloused from years of scrubbing floors and turning pages, traced the lines of a worn hymn book as she stared out at the horizon, searching for something she couldn't name. The Jacksons were a family marked by misfortune, as if a shadow trailed them through the generations. Clara's older sister, Lena, had been a schoolteacher until a whispered scandal, nobody ever said what, cost her job and her pride. Her brother Marcus spent his days in a haze of cheap whiskey and dice games down by the riverfront, his laugh hollowed out by years of bad choices. Her youngest sister, barely 20, had run off with a smooth-talking drifter, only to return to Clarksdale broken, living in a rented room above a bar in Memphis. If you looked at the Jacksons, you'd swear some curse clung to them, invisible but heavy, like the damp heat of a Delta summer. Clara was the last one standing, though her knees wobbled under the weight. Every night, she knelt by her bed, her grandmother's Bible open to Psalm 23, praying for a way out. "Lord, I'm tired," she'd whisper, her voice cracking. "Show me a sign. I can't carry this family's pain forever." She didn't know that her prayers would lead her not to salvation, but to the heart of a secret her family had buried deeper than the roots of the old pecan tree in their yard. One Sunday morning, at the Mount Zion Baptist Church on Oak Street, where the organ wailed and the congregation swayed, a man named Daniel Carter approached Clara after service. He was a mechanic, broad-shouldered and quiet, with eyes that held a steady kindness. His hands, stained with engine grease, moved with a careful grace, as if he could fix more than just cars. "Clara," he said, his voice low but clear, "you always look like you're carrying the world. You ever let anybody help?" She laughed, caught off guard, and they started talking, about the sermon, the heat, the way the town seemed frozen in time. Over weeks, their conversations grew longer, spilling into coffee at the diner, walks along the Sunflower River, and shared prayers under the stars. Daniel found her a job keeping books at his auto shop, a small but steady paycheck that felt like a lifeline. For the first time in years, Clara felt her heart lift, like a bird breaking free of a cage. One evening, as the sky burned orange and the street lamps flickered on, Daniel took her hand outside the shop. "Clara, I'm not a man for games," he said. "I want you to be my wife." Her breath caught, joy flooding her chest like a river breaking a dam. She ran home, her sandals slapping the cracked sidewalk, and burst into the kitchen. "Mama, Daniel's asked to marry me," she called, her voice bright with hope. But her mother, Esther, stood at the sink, her hands frozen in soapy water, her face tight as a coiled spring. Esther was a wiry woman, her graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. "Where's this man from?" she asked, her voice low, almost a growl. Clara, still buzzing with excitement, laughed. "He's from right here, Mama, born and raised in Clarksdale. He's good, you'll see." But Esther's eyes darkened, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You don't know what you're asking for, girl. That man ain't for you. Drop it." Clara's joy curdled into confusion. Her mother had always nagged her about settling down, about giving her grandchildren to spoil. Why this sudden wall? "Mama, why? What's wrong with him?" she pressed. Esther turned away, wiping her hands on a faded dishcloth. "I said drop it. You bring him here, and I'll send him running myself." The words hung in the air, sharp and final. Clara stood frozen, her heart sinking like a stone in the river. That night, she lay awake, her mind spinning. Why would her mother, who'd watched her struggle alone for years, block her chance at happiness. Something wasn't right, like a note played off-key in a hymn. The next morning, Clara drove her rattling old Buick to her Aunt Ruby's house across town, a tidy bungalow with a rose garden that bloomed defiantly against the delta's dust. Ruby, her father's sister, was a woman who spoke plain and loved fierce, her kitchen always smelling of cornbread and sage. Clara poured out her story, tears streaking her face, her voice breaking as she recounted Esther's reaction. Ruby's eyes narrowed, her fingers tapping the table. "That woman's hiding something," Ruby said. "Always has." By noon, Ruby had called a family meeting, and Clara's cousins and uncles crowded into Esther's living room, their voices rising like a storm. "She's 32, Esther," Ruby said, her hands on her hips. "You can't chain her to this house forever. Let her live." Clara's cousins nodded, their faces a mix of pity and frustration. Esther swept the floor, her broom moving in sharp, angry strokes, her eyes fixed on the ground. The room grew heavy with silence, the kind that presses against your chest. Finally, Esther muttered, "If they want to marry, let 'em. But don't say I didn't warn you." Her voice was flat, but her eyes flickered with something Clara couldn't read. Fear, maybe, or guilt. Clara thought the fight was won. Daniel's family came to the house a week later, bringing gifts, a quilt stitched by his mother, a basket of sweet potatoes, a small sum of cash to show respect. The engagement was set, simple but joyful, with plans for a spring wedding at Mount Zion. But the moment the deal was sealed, Daniel changed. His calls stopped coming. His texts went cold, unanswered. Clara waited, first with patience, then with a gnawing dread. She'd call, and the phone would ring into silence. Once, she saw "read" on her message, but no reply. "Daniel, what did I do?" she texted, her fingers trembling, her heart pounding like a drum. Silence. Weeks turned into months. Clara stopped eating much, her cheeks hollowing out, her eyes shadowed. Her co-workers at the auto shop whispered, asking if she was sick. Even at church, where she'd once sung with her whole soul, her hymns felt hollow, her smile forced. 6 months later, a friend of Daniel's, a wiry man who fixed transmissions, pulled her aside. "Clara, he's saying he's not ready," he said, avoiding her eyes. "Said he made a mistake." The words hit like a fist, stealing her breath. Clara locked herself in her room that night, dropped to her knees and whispered, "God, I'm not fighting flesh and blood anymore. I'm fighting whatever's hiding in the dark." She changed how she prayed. No more soft pleas for guidance. She prayed like a warrior, fierce and unyielding, her voice rising in the quiet of her room. "Lord, break whatever's binding me," she demanded, her Bible open, her hands clenched. "Show me the truth." One night, out of the blue, Daniel called, his voice shaky, almost broken. "Clara, I don't know what came over me," he said. "I was a fool, pushing you away. You're the one I want." Tears stung her eyes, but she held firm, asking him to prove it. He did, coming back to finalize the engagement, his family doubling their gifts as an apology. They married in a quiet ceremony at Mount Zion, Clara in a simple yellow dress, her heart full despite the lack of fanfare. The congregation clapped, the organ sang, but Esther sat stone still at the back, her eyes like storm clouds, watching something no one else could see. Clara and Daniel built a life in a small rented house near the river, its walls painted a hopeful blue. They had 2 children, Isaac, a boy with his father's steady eyes, and Grace, a girl whose laugh could light up a room. They weren't rich, but they were content, praying together each night, eating meals on a wobbly kitchen table, teaching their kids to sing hymns and tie their shoes. For 3 years, life felt like a gift, fragile but real. Then, without warning, Daniel started to fade. He'd clutch his chest, wince with no cause, or wake up too weak to stand. Doctors ran tests, found nothing. No fever, no infection, just a man wasting away. He grew distant, snapping at Clara over small things, avoiding the kids' hugs. One night, he sat her down, his hands trembling. "Clara, I don't feel the same anymore," he said, his voice hollow. "I don't know what's wrong with me." Clara's heart sank. They'd been so solid, prayerful, simple, rooted in faith. How could this happen? She doubled her prayers, fasted until her head spun, but nothing changed. 3 months later, Daniel collapsed in the auto shop, his tools clattering to the floor. Hospitals, specialists, prayer circles, nothing helped. He died on a gray Tuesday morning, his hand limp in Clara's, leaving her with 2 children and a grief too heavy to carry. At the funeral, Esther stood by her side, her face unreadable. "Come home, Clara," she said. "You can't raise them alone in that house." Exhausted, her spirit bruised, Clara agreed, packing up her kids and moving back to the old shotgun house. That's when the strangeness began. The house felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. Spiders spun webs faster than Clara could sweep them away, their delicate threads appearing overnight in corners and doorframes. The air smelled of damp rot, no matter how much she scrubbed with bleach. At night, the silence was thick, broken by odd sounds, scratches in the walls, a low hum like a voice too far to hear. Isaac started waking up screaming, his small body trembling. "Mama, a black dog chased me in my dreams," he'd sob. Grace, barely 4, whispered, "Mama, something's watching us at night. I see it in the window." Clara brushed it off as grief at first, but the signs piled up, each one a pebble in her shoe. Esther was different too. She moved through the house like a ghost, her footsteps soft, her eyes avoiding Clara's. She'd cook, slip into her room, and shut the door, speaking only in clipped sentences. "Eat your supper," she'd say, "or mind the kids." The children grew pale, their eyes wide, their dreams filled with shadowed figures and clawing hands. One night, Clara woke to a sound like a wail, sharp and inhuman, coming from the backyard. She grabbed a flashlight, her heart pounding like a drum, and stepped outside, the beam cutting through the dark. Nothing but the rustle of pecan trees and the glint of fireflies. The wail came again the next night, then the next, always at the same hour, a low, mournful cry that raised the hair on her arms. Clara's prayers turned desperate. "Lord, show me what's in this house," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "Protect my babies." The kids' nightmares grew worse. Isaac drew pictures of a dog with glowing eyes, its teeth bared. Grace refused to sleep alone, clinging to Clara's side. One evening, as Clara tucked them in, Isaac grabbed her hand. "Mama, it's in the house," he whispered. "It's under Grandma's bed." Clara's stomach twisted, but she kissed his forehead, promising to check. That night, she crept to Esther's door, listening. The hum was there again, faint but unmistakable, coming from inside. She didn't dare knock. The next morning, Esther emerged from her room, her face gaunt, her hands trembling like leaves in a storm. "Clara, sit down," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Clara sat at the kitchen table, dread pooling in her stomach like cold water. Esther's eyes were hollow, her skin ashen. "I can't keep it in any more," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm part of something old, something dark. My mother taught me rituals, things to keep us safe, to keep us tied. Hoodoo, Clara. Not the kind you hear about in songs. The kind that binds you, that demands a price. I was supposed to pass it to you, but you were too strong, too full of light. Your prayers, your faith, they pushed it back. So I tried to protect you by keeping you close, stopping your marriage. When that failed, it took Daniel instead." Clara's blood ran cold, her breath catching in her throat. "What took him, Mama?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Esther's eyes filled with tears. "The thing we serve. It's hungry, Clara. It demands a price. A life, a soul. I didn't give it you, so it took him." She collapsed, sobbing, her body shaking as if a dam had broken. Clara sat frozen, her mind reeling. Her mother, the woman who'd raised her, who'd sung her lullabies, had been part of something that stole her husband, her happiness. The room spun, the air thick with betrayal. Weeks later, Esther fell ill. No fever, no cough, just a fading, like a candle burning out. She lay in bed, her eyes wide, staring at the ceiling as if waiting for something. One morning, she was gone, still as stone, her hands folded over her chest. Clara wept, not for love, but for the weight of what her mother had carried, and what she'd left behind. When they moved Esther's body, Clara helped clear the room. She lifted the mattress, and her breath stopped. Underneath was a tangle of feathers, bones, and twine, smeared with something dark and sticky, like blood long dried. A jar sat in the corner, filled with dirt and what looked like teeth. A neighbor, helping with the cleaning, gasped and crossed herself. "That's hoodoo, Clara," she whispered. "That's what's been holding this house." Clara stared, the pieces clicking into place. The spiders, the whales, the nightmares, Daniel's death. Her mother's secrets had poisoned them all, a venom seeping through the walls. They buried Esther that afternoon in the churchyard, under a sky heavy with clouds. That night, the house was quiet. No wails, no scratches, no hum. Isaac and Grace slept through the night, their faces peaceful for the first time in months. In the weeks that followed, the family began to heal, as if a weight had lifted. Lena got a new job teaching at a community center, her smile returning. Marcus sobered up, started working construction, his hands steady for the first time in years. Clara's youngest sister called, saying she was coming home, ready to start over. Clara herself felt lighter, like a fog had burned away in the morning sun. While cleaning Esther's room, Clara found a scrap of paper tucked in a hymn book, scrawled with her mother's handwriting. "If I don't give them you, they'll take everything." The words chilled her, a final confession of her mother's fear. Clara took the paper to the backyard, struck a match and watched it burn, the smoke curling into the sky like a prayer answered. She made a vow then and there. She would never return to this house, never let its shadows touch her children again. Clara moved her kids to a small apartment near the river, a place with clean air and windows that let in the light. She went back to her job at the library, her days filled with the soft rustle of pages and the chatter of patrons. One afternoon, a co-worker named James, a widower with a gentle smile and a habit of bringing her coffee, stopped by her desk. "Clara, you've been through hell," he said, his voice warm. "But you're still standing, stronger than most. Can I take you to dinner sometime?" She looked at him, saw the kindness in his eyes, and smiled. A real smile, the kind that felt like home. "I'd like that," she said. A year later, they married in a small ceremony at Mount Zion. Clara in a blue dress that caught the sunlight like a promise. The congregation sang, the kids danced, and for the first time, Clara felt free. She wasn't the same woman who'd knelt in despair years before, begging for a sign. She'd faced the dark, learned its name, and walked away. Now she tells her story without fear, her voice steady as she speaks to anyone who'll listen. "The danger isn't always out there," she says, her eyes bright with hard-won wisdom. "Sometimes it's in the walls you call home, in the blood you love, in the secrets you inherit. But you can break free. Pray hard, love fierce, and don't let the shadows win."